I've been really getting into the culture novels by Iain M recently. I've read the first 3 so far, Consider Phlebas, The Player of Games, and Use of Weapons. They're all excellent and I recommend them to any sci-fi fan. The culture operates at a higher technology level than is common for sci-fi protagonists, being at a similar level to the War in Heaven Necrons or the Halo Forerunners. I think this makes for quite unique stories. I wanted to examine Banks's culture, both on its own terms as a civilization, compare it with modern Western civilization where appropriate, and give some of my thoughts on bits I found interesting. If anything I say in this video is addressed in any of the later culture novels, you have my apologies. Please let me know in the comments if this is the case. Space habitats. Firstly, he's convinced me that space habitats are the optimal solution to life in space rather than terraforming planets, as they provide infinitely more living space per unit mass than planets. I still think we should terraform Mars, largely because it would be cool to do so, but I accept that the long-term future of space colonization lies in O'Neill cylinders and the like. The meaning crisis. He doesn't seem to go deeply into this, but Banks mentions that most of the citizens live vicariously through the actions of contact and special circumstances, and find their meaning through these good works. Oh, and hedonism, of course. People spend their time travelling, partying, having sex, and playing hyper-realistic VR video games. I suspect that such an existence would cause a meaning crisis among the population. Why do I think this? Well, because this is further along the path we are currently on, and we already have a meaning crisis. I do wish Banks had covered this aspect of the culture a bit more, but I can understand why he didn't. I suppose a story about a bunch of people having a meaning crisis wasn't quite the tone he was looking for in his sci-fi utopia. Transgenderism. Transgenderism is never directly discussed by name in the novels, presumably because the first book came out in 1987 and it wasn't really in the discourse at this point. However, the concept itself would be irrelevant within the culture, because due to extensive genetic engineering, the citizens can change their biological gender at will. They just have to think about doing so in a certain manner, and the changes will begin, and take between a few months and a year to complete. I'm not sure if this is possible in the real world. I imagine if we developed sufficiently advanced nanotechnology that we could alter genes and cause the morphological changes required. Within the culture, changing genders is not limited to people with gender dysphoria. Most people switch back and forth across their long lives. And yeah, I could see this happening. I've never been particularly dysphoric in my own body, except wanting bigger calves, but if I was going to live for 1,000 years and I could change my biological gender at will with no side effects, I'd probably spend a few decades as a woman. If the technology existed to make changes this radical to your body, Ben 10 style, I'd also be spending some time as a Primarch and probably a dolphin as well. But maybe I'm a bit of an outlier in this. Human enhancement. There is far less human enhancement in these books than I would think would come from a civilization with this level of technology. They have some amount of enhancements, such as longer lifespans, communication implants, and drug glands that let them produce a cocktail of chemicals. These chemicals have effects such as mood alterations, psychedelic effects, pleasure enhancement, speeding up neural processes so time subjectively slows down, and turning off pain, amongst others. But why not more? The claim in the books is that they have drones and minds that can do everything, so there's no need for humans to have super strength or intelligence, but I don't really buy it. We see they have anti-grav tech used in their drones. Why hasn't any human decided to have an anti-grav device implanted into them so they can fly? I would do this, even if purely so I can cosplay as invincible, so surely someone out of the trillions of individuals in the culture had that idea. And even if within the confines of the culture, superintelligence isn't required, surely their agents in contact and special circumstances could benefit from having an IQ of 400. Again, this might just be a constraint of the medium. It's probably hard to write characters who are that smart whilst also giving them challenges that befit their intellect and also making them relatable to the reader. But in a post-scarcity society of the culture's tech level, I think people would be giving themselves all kinds of superpowers. Socialism. The culture is Banks's vision of an anarcho-socialist utopia. And funnily enough, I think that socialism might actually work if you live in a post-scarcity civilization run by hyper-intelligent, largely benevolent machines. But we're at least a Kardashev level away from that future. I think you need at least a Dyson swarm and related infrastructure before you can even think about reaching the level of post-scarcity where everyone can have whatever they want, whenever they want. I'm not sure it would be the optimal model to follow for this level of technological advancement, but I suppose that depends on what metrics you want to measure. I don't have much more to say on this. I don't think socialism works very well at our tech level, but I'm willing to concede that it might work at a higher tech level. Although still probably not if it's run by humans. But this is all very theoretical. But maybe I'm wrong. If you're a socialist who wants to prove me wrong, then go build a Dyson swarm, because someone needs to. Crime. The culture has no laws, yet people don't generally commit serious antisocial behaviour. In the rare case where someone commits a crime of passion and murders someone, they are then followed around by a drone for the rest of their life who ensures they don't do it again. This and the threat of being socially isolated apparently deters most people. I'm not entirely convinced by this. Banks seems to be suggesting that crime is caused by socio-economic factors, culture, and the rare crime of passion, such as if you're walking on your partner with another person. It may be the case that these are the primary factors that cause antisocial behaviour, but it ignores nature and puts all the emphasis on nurture. Twin studies suggest that psychopathy has a strong heritable component. If people are born psychopaths or sadists due to genetics, then antisocial behaviour can never be eliminated through nurture alone. I do not blame Banks for this assumption. The idea of tabula rasa, or the blank slate, is central to modern liberal philosophy, and he was born in Scotland so was raised within this context. I just think that it's provably incorrect, and this is something the liberal worldview still hasn't accepted. I can see a few ways that antisocial behaviour problem could have been solved for within the culture. Firstly, the minds are hyper-intelligent and extremely technologically advanced. It's probable that they have a complete understanding of the human genome as well as the genomes of other humanoids within the culture. Thus, it's feasible that they could be scanning every fetus's genome and making edits should negative traits be detected. For already developed individuals with these traits, they may be puppeteering them along throughout their whole lives so they can avoid situations that may cause them to commit these acts, without the individuals being any the wiser. The minds have no issue socially engineering other civilizations, so I suspect they'd have no issue doing it to their own citizens. I suppose from a certain perspective you could argue that controlling every aspect of a person's life to prevent them from committing antisocial behaviour could be considered nurture. However, it's far beyond what's normally meant by the term. Integrating cultures. The books discuss how the culture is ever expanding and integrating entire societies into itself. It uses contact and special circumstances to influence societies it encounters to become more culture-like. We see and consider Phoebus that if a society is diametrically opposed to it and of a similar technological level and power, it will go to war with them if all else fails. There are differences between the culture's approach and that being undertaken by the modern West. The culture is expanding. It is essentially colonizing new peoples after using subterfuge to convince said peoples that the culture is correct in its beliefs and practices. I'm not making a moral judgment here. I probably agree with most of the culture's practices given its technology level. I'm not sure I want to be ruled by machines, but I doubt I'll have a choice in the matter, and if they are indeed conscious, benign, and hyper-intelligent, then they'll probably do a better job for us than our current leaders. Anyway, the culture are imperialists, if benign ones. The modern West, by contrast, isn't expanding outwards. The age of traditional empires is over, for now at least. The West is allowing peoples from cultures with radically different beliefs, conceptions of right and wrong, and attitudes towards the individual versus the group to settle within it. It is then making little to no attempt to foster its own ideals within these people because something mid-century Germany. The culture has a number of advantages available to it over the modern West when it comes to integrating other groups into itself. Firstly, by using their agents to shape the culture of the societies they encounter prior to integrating them into themselves. The citizens of the culture are sheltered from fanatics and extremists who hate everything their society stands for. They have no fifth column. Secondly, as they are a post-scarcity civilization and ever-expanding, they don't have the issue of people organising into groups and factions to fight, politic and scam over limited resources. Nobody needs to do this. The machines run what we would understand as the economy. Everyone in the culture could just sit around socialising and doing mind-altering substances, and the society could support that. In fact, it seems this is exactly what happens. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, our societies aren't like this. People need to work to keep society from collapsing, and so if it's noticed that certain groups are extracting and not contributing, this will cause resentment and division. Thirdly, as mentioned previously, I doubt that the minds would have any qualms about conducting mass social engineering on both the current population and any incomers. And if they did do this, they would be infinitely better and more subtle in their attempt than our leaders are. Not that I want our leaders to be doing this to us, but they are trying regardless. Finally, numbers. The culture is presumably composed of trillions of individuals, and so any introduction of a new group of millions or even a few billion individuals is a drop in the bucket, composing fractions of a percent of the total population. Again, this is very different from the replacement migration that's occurring in the modern West. I think a more appropriate sci-fi comparison to the approach Western civilization is taking can be found in Warhammer 40k. This point, or a similar one, has already been made by thinkers such as Carl Benjamin and Morgoth. In the setting, 1,000 psykers are sacrificed daily to feed energy into the corpse of a god emperor. Those of you who can't see the mirror this holds to the modern West clearly haven't heard of the Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK. Thousands of young girls had their horrific abuse covered up by the state in order to preserve a decaying liberal order and its fanciful multicultural utopia. The grooming gangs are far from the only example of citizens being sacrificed. In the Warhammer universe, I believe that the sacrifice of psykers is justified. After all, they are being sacrificed to protect humanity from the literal forces of hell. In the modern West, citizens are being sacrificed in order to protect the elites from facing reality. AI alignment. The minds are the artificial superintelligences of the culture. They control the vast ships and megastructures. There are more human-level artificial general intelligences housed in drones, but the minds are the big boys. They really are the best-case scenario when it comes to superintelligence. Sure, they can sometimes be a bit scheming and manipulative when they want to, and will blackmail a citizen if it serves their ends or those of the wider culture. But they aren't turning people into paperclips because it's more efficient to transport them that way, and they haven't genocided the humanoids. They do generally seem to want what's best for their wards. I think this is probably what has got people like Elon, who are concerned about AI alignment, so interested in these novels. They present a potential future where alignment goes right, and the marvels that such a future could provide. Thank you for listening, I hope you enjoyed. I put a fair bit of work into writing this one, but it was an interesting concept to think through, and I enjoyed doing so. I'm quite a small channel, so if you'd like to see more from me, any likes, comments and subscriptions would be greatly appreciated. I also have an X account now if you want to follow me there. I'll put it on the screen. Anyway, hope to see you next time.